Hey, Lindsay. Are we in different directions right now?
How
I'm
are
good. How
you?
are you?
You are.
I
You're on the side, and I'm like this. I'm not sure why. You might be able to turn it on the
There
top.
we
There's
go.
a little.
We're figuring out technology. Hello, good morning.
I'm feeling like that
A
today. A
little
little
upside down. I
upside down.
totally hear you. Well, I'm so happy that you're here. We've been looking forward to this conversation for so long. I love the work that you do. I love the work that Carriage House does. Um, just for our audience, my name is Alex, and I am the social media director here at Repro Film. And I'm talking with Lindsey Bliss, who I will allow to introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. I am Lindsey Bliss. I am one of the co-founders at Carriage House Birth. I am also a birth worker. I just started a little bit of end of life care, so I'm expanding my practice to be a little bit more full spectrum. I am also the parent to 7 children, and I teach childbirth ed
So,
classes.
just a couple of things.
Just a few things. Anything that's related to
Yeah,
crossing some sort of threshold in your life. I like to help people cross thresholds or any type of major life transition. It could be doula support through a divorce or through a gender affirmation procedure or an abortion, or there's different types of doulaing that I do in the scope of things and
that's
the
amazing. I
realm of
actually never
doula
considered
work.
having a doula for divorce or for gender affirmation surgery, but that makes complete sense.
I mean,
Yeah.
we need support for a lot of things, and sometimes we can't find the support or can't articulate the need for support, or there's shame around asking for support, right? Somebody just said doula
Yeah.
support for endometriosis. Hey, I've got adenomyosis, which is another uterine disorder that I've struggled with. The people who've helped me through that are other people who also have it, or other people that are in that
Right.
reproductive health space have been able to give me support for that too. So doulas for everything. And divorce, come on, there's a lot of support that's needed when you
Yeah,
go through that
moved
transition,
away
you
from,
know?
a system where we were very community oriented. And I feel like a doula is kind of a perfect person, doula and therapist, maybe whatever works for any particular person to supplement that community support that we once had from someone who is educated in that field and can provide quality care. I think it's so important.
Absolutely. And I'll point out, doulas are not clinicians, but some doulas are actually therapists and do wear
Mm.
different hats, but doulas, for the most part, when they are in the doula role, are wearing that hat as opposed to whatever hats they may wear with other modalities that they learn or other
Totally.
trainings that they
Totally.
have.
Cool. So I wanted to invite you on today because, and if we have any technical difficulties, just bear with us. But Repro Film is an organization that is at the intersection of art and advocacy. We have a free digital newsletter every month that focuses on some element of reproductive health care or justice. And this month, our focus is on pregnancy and the placenta. So I thought, who better to have on than you? I love Carriage House's work. You guys are at the forefront of doula care in the United States. So I wanted to start out by asking you about your background in birth work and what drew you to it, what keeps you passionate about it now.
I think what draws a lot of birth workers to birth work is their own experience in birth, but not everyone has to get to birth work because of either a good or a bad experience, but that's how I was led to it. I did a lot of advocacy work as a rape crisis counselor, so I understood a little bit about advocacy work. And then when I had given birth myself, I saw the need for advocacy through that process. And I went to a doula training, and end of story. And that's
Right.
how it started for me. Um, that and then I've been doing it for a little over 13 years now, and my passion just keeps growing because I don't think that once you're trained or you've done all the things that you are ever an expert. I think that's the thing about this field. It's a constant learning. I'm constantly learning, trying to do better. being humble in this work. If birth doesn't surprise you and doesn't humble you, you should probably stop doing it. And yeah, and when you brought up placenta, I mean, I'm passionate about placentas because of the advocacy piece. Yes, I know that there are all these benefits and things about consumption of placenta. I do not encapsulate placentas, but I'm a huge advocate for people taking their placentas out of the medical industrial
absolutely.
complex.
That was going to be one of my next questions. So, you know, why don't we jump into that now? I know it's something that you're passionate about. Can you tell us, you know?
Yeah, sorry, I jumped ahead.
Tell us what you're passionate about in regards to, you know, what happens when you leave your placenta, maybe at the hospital.
So a couple of things could happen. One, if you are a higher risk birthing person, they might be taking the placenta and doing some tests to determine maybe why your baby was premature, or if there was something that came up and they're trying to find more answers, it may go to be assessed. So that's one thing that can happen. If you are deemed a higher risk pregnancy, they might say, oh, it's going directly to the lab. But unless you're getting information from that assessment, they don't need to take it. Does that make sense? Like, I had twins and they're like, oh, sorry, you can't release it. I'm like, actually I can, because I don't actually benefit or need any of the information that they would be gathering from testing my twin placenta. So one is they could take it to do testing. Another is that it's medical waste. Nothing happens to it. And then there are some places that sell it, and they could sell it for cosmetics. They could sell it for research. There's a lot of organizations doing research, and I love that placentas, you know, are being researched to maybe cure cancer, or, you know, there's really extensive research being done. The bone that I have to pick is not about researching placentas or cord blood or any of those things. It's that we can't profit off of selling our placenta, right? There actually is a law in place, like we can't sell our own organs for profit. Like we're not able to do that. But the hospital can sell your placenta for a profit. And I think I'd done some preliminary research. Don't quote me exactly, but I heard the range was around $50K or so per placenta.
Oh, wow.
And again, I know all the hospitals don't sell placentas, but I know it's happening. And I know a lot of research that's being done. I kind of stay abreast of what's happening. The bone that I have to pick is like, we grew the organ. Right. We should have a say if it's going to go to research, if it's going to be thrown out. And so I'm not a placenta pusher. If you don't want to eat it, don't eat it. If you don't want to bury it in your yard, don't bury it in your yard. I'd rather you take it home and throw it in a garbage bag in your alleyway in Queens than I would have you keep it in the hospital system, having them profit off of you and the organ you created without your consent.
Right. That's such a good point. I had never heard of that until you brought it up to me. So I'm so happy to know that. As a little bit of background to those who maybe aren't as familiar with the placenta, its role in birth, and what some people do with it in the postpartum period, can you give us a little bit of background on all of that?
So placenta encapsulation can be done. You can either do it raw, you can do it, they dehydrate it. There's different processes in making it into pills that you can consume. The idea is that the placenta, it's an organ meat essentially, and so it's very nutrient dense and rich. A lot of the hormones are lost through birthing, a lot of the nutrients are lost, and so the idea of consuming the placenta restores some of what was lost. You know, there are theories that, you know, it may not be the best for everybody. And that's true. That's like with any type of medicine or any type of healing, that like it may not work for everybody. Some people don't always have the best. It could impact infant feeding or lactation in funny ways for some people. Some people feel really good when they take the pills, and some people have, you know, I've heard people explain like feeling kind of like they're vibrating a little too high, because it's almost like a hormone infusion, and it's so nutrient dense that some systems it's not necessarily for them. Some people don't like the taste. I mean, when it's encapsulated, we're not talking about a really strong taste, but you're consuming a placenta, right? Some people skip the pill route and they'll cut off a lobe at the birth of the placenta and throw it into a blender. And I recommend berries, blackberries, raspberries, blueberries, lots of berries, because that usually masks the taste of the placenta.
Gotcha. That's great information. I feel like it's something that we're now in common vernacular talking about, or in conversation, something that maybe wasn't as well known 50 years ago. And now I'm hearing people, I live in LA, people are always talking about placenta encapsulation now. So I'm interested to see the popularity grow and what people's reactions are to it, for sure.
I mean, midwives would even use a piece of it to put in the lip of the birthing person if there's hemorrhaging. Sometimes it can slow the bleeding if there's a placenta put. And I don't know exactly why that works, but I've heard of that being used as a way to minimize hemorrhaging during the birth process. So all sorts of things with the placenta. With one of my pregnancies, I didn't do it. And then with another pregnancy, I did it. So I had 2 twin pregnancies. I have 2 sets of twins. And with the first set, I didn't encapsulate. With the second set, I did. And I noticed increase in milk volume. I had close to no postpartum depression or anxiety, which I did with my first set of twins. I don't know if it was the placenta pills. I do know that the amazing doula that encapsulated them for me wrote on the jar, happy pills. And like, she had these instructions of like when to take them, and something about that, whether it was the actual placenta medicine or placebo, I don't know, but whatever it was, it worked.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I think to your point about midwives using a part of it in the cheek, I may have read something, don't quote me as fact, about the fact that it contains so much oxytocin and that could cause contractions that would stop the hemorrhaging. So if that's
because of the hormones lost.
That's amazing to me.
Exactly.
The things that our bodies can do is just like endlessly fascinating.
We grow this whole organ for people that grow babies, that we grow this whole organ that sustains this baby is beyond. And I also tell people too, when you birth, to have them give you a tour of the placenta. Some people are a little squeamish and they're like, I don't know if I need to see all that. But my reasoning is not just so that you can like look at the glory of the placenta, is so that you can double check to see that it is fully intact, meaning that there's no pieces missing. What happens if there's placenta retained in the body, you will continue to bleed and hemorrhage. And some people have to go back and get a DNC, even like a week after giving birth. So doing an assessment of the placenta, your care provider, your midwife, your OB will be doing an assessment post-birth. But if you're a curious birther or a partner or family member who's there at the birth, you can ask for a tour of the placenta. This forces them to look at it again with intention. And then, hey, they might have looked at it a second time and said, oh, I don't know if everything's here. And so I like that as a way of, more advocacy for the person.
Absolutely.
Who's birthing,
I mean, birth is
right?
this, obviously we all know, this extremely dramatic period of time. Maybe it's calmed by having a doula, but it's definitely a transformative period. And maybe you're not focusing on the placenta when you have a baby in your arms. So to have someone take the placenta and examine it could give you answers down the line if you continue to bleed or something like that. That could be super helpful information. That's awesome. Well, I wanted to ask you about, we've talked about your history as a birth worker and now working into death care, and this liminal space that exists when someone is transitioning between, life and birth. And I'm wondering what you find to be some of the more magical or transformative or surprising elements of birth, or that kind of space between.
It's hard to put into words. There's something that I didn't, when I got into birth work, I didn't understand how spiritual this work was. I really got into it for the advocacy piece, and I want people to be informed and to know their options and all of this. And which is wildly important. But I also didn't understand the spiritual component to souls entering into crossing through the portals, or souls deciding not to fully transition through, or people transition out of this realm. There's something about that is so divine that I didn't think that I had prepared myself for entering into this space as a birth worker, because I was so focused on like the advocacy and you got to know that, you know, that I was surprised by, yeah, again, and it's sometimes hard to put into words because sometimes the things that I've witnessed, you can't even really explain.
That's so incredible. I feel like that could be a whole other Instagram live in and of itself that I would love to pick your brain on. But I feel like, yeah, I know that, you know, there are women and people with uteruses that come away from this experience with a newfound sense of confidence or self-knowledge. And I think that that is definitely one of the things that I love most about, you know, when birth happens in a way that makes a person, gain new confidence. I love that.
And like, we birth ourselves. Every person that's part of that process is reborn, whether it's the person who's given birth or the people who are receiving this child or parenting this child, right? You don't actually have to be the person birthing to go through this major birthing of self, right? That's the stuff that I focus on more than the actual physical act. Like, yeah, you should know how all the things work if possible, or if you have access to that. Everyone should have access to that. But this birthing of self piece is something that I think some of us don't know how to look at or are surprised by, and can impact everyone in the space who's going to be parenting this child, who are the new parents of this child. And that's the piece that I think we're often most surprised by, is the birthing of self.
Absolutely. And then there's the transition away from birth and into the postpartum period that I want to talk about, because I feel that so much attention is paid to the pregnancy, to the birth, and then there's what happens afterwards and having to take care of oneself, one's partner. Can you walk us through a little bit about what people might overlook or not plan for in the postpartum period, and what a postpartum doula might do to support that time?
That's a really great question. Culturally, a lot of us here in the United States, like, not everyone's married, but like, we plan for a wedding, right? Like, we get flowers, we get music, we get, you know, like the details on the outfits and the things and all of, like, it's a big deal. And, you know, then when you give birth, it's not as big of a deal culturally for some people. I don't want to stereotype all people, but it's like, oh, I'm just going to go to somebody my friend told me, or I've been going to this GYN forever. And so it's not the same level of intention that goes into, and it's shifting though. It's shifting with people knowing that they have options and knowing that they don't have to choose within these harmful systems, and that they have choice. But, you know, when it comes to birth, I always say, I'm like, the birth is like to the wedding, like postpartum is like the marriage. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you the wedding day and the wedding is all like this, and then you're like, oh shit, I got to be married. Like, that takes work. I didn't realize that it entailed this, this, and this. Similar to being postpartum and having a baby, a lot of people are so, I mean, for good reason, really focused on getting the baby out of their body, right, in a safe way, in a way that they can actually survive the process. Like, stakes are really fucking high here. So there's a reason why there's so much focus and fear and wanting there to be a safe experience, that often the postpartum space doesn't get the focus and attention it deserves, because we're just trying to survive the birth. And also, our culture has like, United States has zero paid parental leave. Zero. None. Nada. Zero. You know, so it shows how we honor and hold parents as they cross through these portals, these thresholds into parenthood. there's no system of
That just
support.
is absolutely mind-blowing to me, especially, but it's not when you consider the maternal mortality rate in the United States, especially as grave as it is for Black women and birthing people, at 3 times the rate as it is for white women and birthing people. It just seems like there's a lack of care for the people who are giving birth. And the expectation, I guess, is just that you, 6 weeks later, jump back in, and your body isn't even fully recovered. What are some ways that we might be able to advocate for paid parental leave for both the birthing person and if they have a partner, their partner as well?
That's a good question too. And I will circle back to something you said as well. Anybody who hasn't already, watch Aftershock documentary just to get a picture of what is occurring now in the landscape of birth in this country. And Aftershock on Hulu, it's an amazing documentary, must watch. And it also highlights where we're at, what's happening when people are birthing. And, you know, I think about parental leave, and a lot of times it depends on who you're working for. There are certain companies that have great parental leave packages, but it's so individual. You know, a lot of states have policies in place that they don't have to pay you, but they have to hold your job for a certain amount of time, but there's no paid leave, right? So, I mean, I don't really have answers other than we have to shift the way that we do healthcare overall. And what happens is the community ends up around one another, family, friends, you know, community needs to show up for one another in order to have healthy people moving forward. Because if you're not able to take care of yourself in the postpartum space, that sets you up for your parenting journey at a deficit.
Absolutely. That was actually going to be my next question is, you know, if a birthing person has a partner, how can that partner be most supportive? And I'm sure it's, you know, depending on each person, it might be different, but what are some things that partners could do to be supportive in that postpartum period?
I mean, again, you said it too, that it's every dynamic is so different. You know, with my last baby, my partner worked for himself. He went back to work after 3 days after I gave birth. You know, all our lived realities are so different. There are people that give birth that actually have to go back to work a week after delivering their babies. We're in this place, you know, if you have a partner that has the financial ability to take off work for at least 2 weeks to help with the physical, mental, spiritual healing that needs to take place, that would be great. But I also can't assume that somebody can afford to do that. We live in places where our income doesn't match the increase in rent, where we're living in ways that are not sustainable for building families in a healthy way, or in a way that people are full. I'd done some research, and I think some of the larger corporate, and I don't know if Google might do this, but there's some research that said that if people are getting to bond with their babies, they have adequate time, we're talking 6 months, or there's a longer period of parental leave, also for the partner, right? Also, if, you know, you are the adoptive parents, also if you are, you know, there's all these parents that are transitioning, they're all held in that space. It was shown that they actually come back to work and they're more productive. They make the company more money because they're coming back as whole people. They're not coming back resentful, upset with their pelvic floor, you know, they're prolapsing or they're leaking, or, you know, all of these things. People are coming back not well. And then, so there was these studies, and I can't quote the exact study, but I remember reading it and being like, well, of course. Doesn't that make sense? But capitalism moves so fast. Doesn't care. Keep going. Oh, you can't do it? Next. You can't do it? Next. It doesn't see people's humanity.
And especially when it comes to people with uteruses, I mean, I think that part of the thing that appeals to me with paid parental leave for both the person who's birthing and the partner is that there's this stigma against people with uteruses that they're going to bear children, and therefore they're not maybe going to be thought of first for promotion or held back at work. And there's obviously a pay disparity between people with uteruses and people who don't have uteruses. So parental leave would help to bridge that gap. And I also think it's important that a birth partner comes in and feels a part of the process, because it will help them be a better co-parent as time goes on if they're there for those early bonding days.
I mean, absolutely. I think putting a baby skin to skin on a non-birthing parent completely
Right.
reprograms their DNA. Like it helps with bonding. If you have a partner, my thing is like, if you have the ability to, all of you get naked, lay in the bed together in a big cuddle puddle, like do it for as long as you
Yeah.
are able to. And have people food, have people clean your house. If somebody coming to see you will not clean your toilet, they
Yeah.
should not
Yeah.
be coming over. You know, the people that are going to come see you should be coming to
Hmm.
make sure you're well, not to build a relationship with your
Yeah.
newborn baby who doesn't care if they're coming, only wants, you know, the people tending to
Yeah.
their immediate needs.
Absolutely. So I think
Um,
that that's a really great point when we're thinking about a larger community network and how they can support. You know, if you have a friend who's just given birth or a family member that's just given birth, ask them for what they need, but know that what they need might just be that you come over and bring food that's been meal prepped, or, you know, making a food train and signing all your friends up for it, or cleaning their toilet and maybe not having a lot of like social time. And it can be
yeah.
hard to ask for those things as a birthing parent as well. So, you know, knowing that these people are going through a crazy transition in their life or a huge new moment, and that they might just need support, and the fun time with the baby might come later.
I mean, babies eat every three
Yeah,
hours at best, meaning some will eat every hour, every 2 hours, so every 3 hours. So we're not getting a
right.
lot of sleep as new parents. So the only way for us to get any type of stores of energy is
Mm,
through nutrients, is
mm,
through food. And I'm so big on healing food and through nourishment. And that's what I think of in the postpartum space. How are you going to nourish this new family through their
right,
transition when they are sleep deprived? You said meal train. Yes, please. Meal train. It should be the
right.
norm for everybody. Drop something off. I love dropping off a bag of goodies and not even like having to see them. Like, come down the steps when you can. It's at your door. There's flowers, there's chocolate, there's bone broth, there's, you know, like, think about how you can deeply
Mm,
nourish this family,
right.
mind, body, and soul.
I love that. And for people who, you know, obviously there is a barrier to access here, but for those who are able to afford a postpartum doula, or maybe as an option for a gift from a community member to help provide funding for a postpartum doula, what would that person do to come in and supplement care?
Great question. And there are community-based doula programs that do provide these services too. So I would encourage anybody to do a little preliminary research in the area that you live to see if those organizations exist near you. If you don't know any, you can message me. I'm happy to help provide resources for anybody that's looking for the
Hmm.
support that they deserve. Postpartum doulas can do a range of things. They can help manage infant feeding, right? So some of them have a lot of lactation knowledge and can help with infant feeding, help with bottle feeding. They can help families go to and from the pediatrician. They can help you kind of organize some of the chaos that is the postpartum space. Maybe that's through some meal prep. Maybe that's through protected sleep, right? A lot of postpartum doulas know how to wear a baby and go, all right, you go take a nap. You haven't slept. Like, and maybe that nap is only an hour, but it might be the most restful, deep
Right,
hour that they're going to get
right.
during the entire week. Um, so doulas are more to help the family meet their goals than telling them necessarily what
Mm,
they need to do for success, right? So there's a different energy there. It's creating pathways for the families to make decisions for themselves and feel empowered in that process, as opposed to some of the other support that comes in. It's like, you have to do this, like when we talk about trainers or sleep trainers, and I'm not anti-sleep trainers per se, but that type of energy of, this is the way we do
mm,
it for every baby, because it doesn't work like
right.
that for every family. I co-slept with my kids. If I had had someone come in and start telling me that that was dangerous or I couldn't do that, that would have been a problem and not a good fit for the type of support that I personally was looking for I had a postpartum doula with my last birth, with my last baby. And it was amazing. She came over and made me lentil soup. She checked on my bleeding. She asked me how I was feeling. She sat with me. She witnessed me.
Mm.
She validated me, like all the things. And actually, that is what I needed more than anything. And my partner is supportive and helpful, but he did have to go back to work, as many partners do.
It's just a reality.
So my postpartum doula was the reason that my mental health was as good as it was, because they were also able to be like, hey, have you called your therapist? Or here's this resource. Like, there was somebody that was actually asking me how I was doing.
Right. Which can be rare when the focus is oftentimes mostly on this new life, right? And for a moment we might
baby weight. Yeah. You're going to the pediatrician and they're like, is the baby gaining weight? They're checking the bilirubin levels. They're talking about the immunizations. And like every once in a while, they'll look over at the parent. There are some great pediatricians, so I don't want to knock pediatricians, because there are some amazing family practitioners and pediatricians out there doing the work. But a lot of times the person who's given birth, or the new parent, right? You don't have to be someone who's given birth to be a new parent, sometimes gets missed a little bit in that new postpartum space, you know, and not always.
That actually leads me to one of my final questions, which is, you know, and this may be a big ask for people who've just given birth, but you know, this is a huge time in that person's life. They're navigating having a relationship to self, having a relationship to a newborn, and potentially, if they have one, having a relationship to their partner. What can these people who've just given birth do for self-care, and how can they ask for help and advocate for themselves if they need to?
So how can, say the last part again? I'm sorry, I was reading my ADHD sometimes. Like, somebody's writing a comment. Can you repeat the last
what are
thing
some
that you
opportunities
said?
for self-care for a birthing person? And if one is having a hard time asking for help, do you have any advice?
So self-care, you know, because everything feels so upside down and so chaotic, sometimes it's hard to even know what self-care means in that space. And so I think simple things. I actually was talking to a friend of mine who's a wellness guide and a meditation coach, and is hosting a breath workshop in New York this weekend. So I'm going to plug that for anybody in New York this weekend. But we were talking about breath as a tool. And so in the postpartum space, I would, you know, I have a lot of children. I have a lot of chaos going on. I don't always have time to like sit down and meditate, or take an Epsom salt bath, or go get a massage. Like, that is not rooted in my own personal reality. So what that would mean was, I put my hand on my chest. I do some like deep belly breathing, even for just like a minute. And then I go back into doing whatever it was I was doing. That might also mean, for those of us that do have a partner, shutting the bathroom door for 15 minutes. Like, I required a shower. I required some scrolling time on the toilet. Like, you do whatever you want in there. I needed protected time away. And with I nursed 2 sets of twins. Like, when we say touched out, it's like another level. And so even 15 minutes, I would go, oh my God, I don't have anybody on me. I can take a shower. I could just scroll on the internet. So having a little bit of time, even if it sounds that people are like, 15 minutes, really? That's all you got? Like, that's really all I had time for when I was in the midst of that type of parenting, or that phase. So tap into your breath. Deeply nourish your body with food. Hydrate. These are ways of caring for self. Drink a lot of water. Drink, like more water than you think you need. Eat delicious food that's filling and nourishing to your soul. Put on some music while you're going through the chaos of the day. Like, there's simple things that we can do when we do self-care. Remember, like, hashtag self-care was such a big thing. It's really just about grounding and rooting into your body and acknowledging that you deserve all the things, and centering yourself. We have such a hard time in this society centering ourselves, because we're taught to go back to work, hurry up, let's go, snap back. We're part of snapback culture. When are you going to lose the weight, fit in your jeans again?
Right.
Like all this bullshit that doesn't serve. We just grew a whole human or two or three. Like, we are in this expansive place, and we need to act accordingly to ourselves in order to accommodate that expansion and love on ourselves. Right. Like, look what we just did.
That's such a great point. And I love these ideas. I love putting on maybe some music in the background that helps you reconnect to yourself, or taking a deep belly breath, putting your hand on your heart for 1 minute. If you don't have time in the day, just to kind of let that be your active meditation to come back to self. That's such great advice, and something that doesn't take funds or a lot of time, and is very accessible to everybody.
And also have resources for therapists, for free support groups. There are resources out there. Postpartum Support International. There's resources out there for low cost or free options. Reach out to your local doula community too. We're always happy to help provide what we know and who we've had a good experience working with. Doulas are not clinicians, but we often have really good relationships, and we hear all the stories of who's receiving care and how they're receiving care from all the different places. So if you're ever struggling, the shame piece is what prevents people from sometimes reaching out. Know that you're not alone. Know that you don't have to experience this hardship in silos, but we really have moved away from being in community with one another. We have to work really hard to be in community with one another because of capitalism, because of this, get back to it, grind culture. We don't have this. We have to really embrace moving slow. We have to embrace asking for help. That doesn't come naturally to many of us, most of us. Shit, I'm still learning.
Absolutely. Same. I mean, there's not a lot in our culture that points us in that direction, because it's not immediately profitable, or we haven't considered it so. But like you were saying before, having healthy, happy parents in the long run might help, sustain a company. Not that that's our primary intention. We want a community of people who are healthy and happy. Right?
Yeah. They're focused on money. Right. Look at the numbers. Look at when people are well, going to be better earners for your company, your brand, whatever.
Totally.
And it's unfortunate that we're not being treated well when we're pregnant, when we give birth, and when we're new parents. We don't have the options we need. It's ridiculous what's happening in this country. Like in Alabama right now, there's a birth colleague and somebody in our community who's been very active in trying to open a birth center, a Black-owned birth center in Gainesville, Alabama, the birth sanctuary. They have been coming up against all of this restrictive old legislation to keep it from opening, to prevent people from having options. We're talking about low-risk birthing people, predominantly Black and brown. There's no options, and we're preventing people even from options to give birth. So how do you think these people are going to be that are forced into places they don't want to birth? How are they going to be in the postpartum space? Are they going to even make it out alive of some of these places when it's the stakes are high? And I don't think we're doing enough to really push for choice for people in their birthing and then in the 100%.
I mean, to your point, I read something yesterday, maybe a couple days ago, that Alabama has the highest maternal mortality rate in the country. And so, more power to your friends who are trying to open this birthing space, this birthing center, and bringing healthy birth options to a state that could do so much more to support birthing people.
And anybody who's listening or watches the replay, follow Dr. Midwife or the Birth Sanctuary. There's some action items. You can write letters to say why this is so restrictive and to say why birthing center and choices in childbirth are so important. And they're important factors in reducing the maternal mortality rate. And they're important just in the postpartum space.
Yeah.
It's all interconnected. When one of us gets fucked up birthing, we all get fucked up. It impacts all of us. That we think that this is like a siloed issue. This is all of us. And so all of us should be really mobilizing around expanding choice and options for birthing people. So yeah, I mean, I'll be posting about it on Carriage House's Instagram too. There is still time, I think until September 2nd, to write a letter to show your support for birthing centers opening. And New York has restrictive legislature too. We've been having to cut through lots of red tape here in New York. You know, California is a little different. Every place has its own set of barriers. There's usually not like creation of more access. I'll just leave it at that. It's usually quite
personally, my home state of North Carolina, I live now in California, but I'm from North Carolina, and they are advocating to change the ability for midwives to work outside of hospitals right now. That's something that there's a March for Midwives. I wish I had it off the top of my head, but I believe it's March for Midwives, that you can look up, and I'll just link this later when we post the replay. But if this is something that you're interested in, North Carolina could definitely use your support as well.
I think we all should be interested in expanding access to care, especially when people are dying, you know, and I can't, I'm getting caught up for words because it's very emotional, because it's something that many birth workers fight for individual choice. Now we're fighting for choice for all of us, right? When we're expanding access to care and to different options for birthing people. And most, you know, birthing centers are for healthy, low risk people. We're not asking to service people that need a hospital, but then we're hoping that these hospitals are not harming people, right? So how are we going to get these hospitals in a way that they can decolonize the care that they're giving to people and they're not harming and killing people in the process?
Absolutely. I just, like, I'm sitting here and I'm just nodding my head at everything that you're saying, because I'm so on board with everything that you've brought up. So I want to bring it to my last question for you. And, you know, and then if our audience has any questions after this, I welcome them. But you've written a book, The Doula's Guide to Empowering Your Birth, and Carriage House obviously has so many things on the docket. And I'm wondering if you could maybe expand on either or both of those.
Oh my God. I actually have it next to me, which I usually don't. So funny. I wrote this when I was nursing my last baby. So I was in bed on my phone writing notes and then adding it to the doc in the morning. And like, it was a labor of love. And this book is kind of like going to a prenatal session with me as your doula. So that's kind of what that is. And it says to empowering your birth. I want to be clear that I am not empowering anybody. That is you choosing to empower yourself if you want to. You don't have to. You don't have to have an empowered birth if you don't want. I don't judge. This is just me highlighting some options and some pathways. And there's some, you know, I've got some bone broth recipes. I've got some bath soaks and stuff like that, because those are things that supported me during my pregnancies. I share my birth stories in here. So that's what I'm doing there. And then with Carriage House, we're really working to expand our educational offerings. We have an amazing doula training that we've partnered with Woven Bodies. And interested in checking out Woven Bodies, please do. And Dorcas Davis Consulting and Samantha Huggins, who is part of our education team and one of the co-founders of Carriage House. So I'm just really proud of the things that are blossoming from the collaborations and the partnerships that we've been involved in as of late. And I'm just excited to see where it's all going to go, because I feel like we're all putting in the work and we're all excited to see it.
Absolutely. I am too. I've always been such a fan of y'all's work at Carriage House. I ordered your book. It's on its way, which I'm very excited about. And I want to see if anyone in our audience has any questions before we wrap up. If you've got some, feel free to put it in the chat box for Lindsey. And if not, that's fine too. We've asked a lot of questions live for sure. But yeah, just as a wrap.
I was going to say, we kept this conversation going.
Yeah, we definitely did. We've answered quite a few, and we're going to put a lot of notes when we post the replay about where you can access some of the information that we've discussed. You can look forward to that in the next couple days. And oh, so sweet. I wish I knew all this before I had kids. Thanks, Mama Phil. Great. So, Lindsey, it's been so wonderful connecting with you. Thank you so much for your time and for all of your wisdom where this is concerned. And I'm wishing you the best.
Thank you so much for having me. Hopefully we'll be able to connect.
That sounds great.
Again
Oh, we've
soon.
got one question right before we go from Winter. They're waiting. We're waiting. Oh, I think maybe they weren't able to connect. Okay, well, why don't you reach out to us, Winter, either via maybe Lindsey's Instagram or Carriage House Birth, and to see if she can give you answers there. All right, but thank you so much, Lindsey, and have a great rest of your day.
You too. Take care.
Bye.